Welcome to my presentation of the data collected from two 20-meter sprint tests completed either side of a 5-minute dynamic stretching routine. So stretching is commonplace throughout sport, both static and dynamic. Stretching is used in warm-up routines. It's partly seen to aid in injury prevention, but as Paradisis et al. Showed, that it also has benefits in enhancing performance. So dynamic stretching, as Bain and Chiarucci showed, is preferable to static stretching as part of warm-up because of the close similarity of the exercises to the subsequent exercise that will occur. It also elevates core temperature and increases central drive. So with this experiment, I had no hypothesis that there'll be no significant change in the sprint times achieved before and after a 5-minute period of dynamic stretching. With an experimental hypothesis, a two-tailed experimental hypothesis, that there'll be a significant change in sprint times achieved before and after a 5-minute period of dynamic stretching. So the way in which I went about this, so I used 8 players from a Category 2 academy in England. The test was carried out at Cranford Community College using their full-sized 3G pitch. The 20-metre sprint was measured out using a metric measuring wheel, and traffic cones were set up at either end as gates for the start and finish line. The test was done at 9 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday morning training session, so it was right at the start of the day, and it was done at the first thing in the training session. So the players arrived, and as we waited for players to arrive, there was some light work with a ball passing in pairs, and then the 8 players that I had did their 20-metre sprints. They were encouraged to sprint through the finish line to ensure that it was a correct time. Once every player completed their 20-metre sprint, they went through a 5-minute dynamic stretching routine, which was also measured as 20 metres in length. Players did this in a line. They completed the dynamic stretch, and then it was a jog back to the start, and then they would complete that same dynamic stretch again, jog back before then moving on to another dynamic stretch that would be called out by me. So some of the dynamic stretches they went through were side steps, lunges, opening the gate, closing the gate, leg extensions, reverse leg extensions, squats, jump squats, and skipping. After each player had completed their 5-minute dynamic stretching routine, they returned to the start gate, and in the same order that they had done the first dynamic stretching, sprint, completed a second sprint. These times were then recorded, both the first sprint time, second sprint time, and then the time difference, and put into an Excel spreadsheet. Players' names were not used, and was simply read as player 1, player 2, player 3 in the order that they had undergone the sprint tests. And this data was then moved on to an onto a Google Sheets document, along with other data collected. The results of the data showed there was a mean time for sprint 1 of 3.81 seconds, with a standard deviation of 0.55 seconds, and the mean time for sprint 2 was 3.72 seconds with a standard deviation of 0.51 seconds. A t-test that was conducted on the data showed that there was significance, with p equals 0.001. Also broke down the data in terms of age brackets, using 5 different brackets of 0 to 6 years, 7 to 11 years, 12 to 16 years, 17 to 21 years, and 22 to 26 years. with the biggest change in mean time coming in the 0 to 6 years age group. There was significant difference in the change in time shown by the t-tests in the 0 to 6 years age group, 17 to 21 years age group, and 22 to 26 years age group. The age groups 7 to 11 and 12 to 16, there was not shown to be any significance in the change in sprint time from sprint 1 to sprint 2. So, as I said, there was a significant difference in the sprint after a 5-minute dynamic stretching routine for the group as a whole, which supports literature that dynamic stretching has been seen to provide greater performance increase, closer to performance, or when tested for benefits soon after completion compared to static stretching, which is supported by Boehm et al. In 2016. There was no significant change in the sprint times, as I mentioned, for 7 to 11 and 12 to 16, which might be down to the ages of these players. The work by Paradisis et al. Shows that the mode of stretching used in adolescent boys and girls actually needs to be more task specific. There were limitations to the testing and to how the data was collected. The time of testing could have had an effect in terms of being done at 9 a.m, but other data might have been collected at different times. The process of the testing, so players getting a longer rest time at the start or the end of a dynamic stretching routine than others may have had an effect. The equipment used, I used a metric measuring wheel, but this might not have been the case for all the data collected. It also would have been more accurate to be able to use speed gates rather than a Casio stopwatch to make sure that the time was exactly what the time each player got. Dynamic stretching and which dynamic stretches were used, the intensity of the dynamic stretch routine, and also how the dynamic stretch routine was conducted could also have an effect on the sprint times collected, as well as the level of the players being used and the trained level of the players, which could also have had an effect on the significance of the 7 to 11 age group and the 12 to 16 age group. So, in conclusion, the experimental hypothesis can be accepted, as overall there was a significant change in sprint times achieved after a 5-minute dynamic stretching routine. As Turkey et al. Show, which supports this, 1 to 2 sets of 20-meter dynamic stretches in a warm-up can improve 20-meter sprint performance. And as Boehm et al. Showed, this can particularly have an effect when it's tested, when it's done close to the performance or tested quite soon after the dynamic stretching routine. However, there is work by Turkey, Belchiari et al., which shows that sprint performance and repeated sprintability are not affected by regular dynamic stretching when done over a period of time, so over a 4-week or 8-week period of time. So future testing, it would be useful to maybe have different control groups and have more variation of the length of the dynamic stretching routine and how long this dynamic stretch routine is carried out for over a number of days or weeks, and also to affect what dynamic stretch routine is done, the intensity of it, or maybe even how long before performance this is done, or how soon after the stretch routine this is tested. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and the references can be found on slide 9 of the presentation. Thank you.